Nobody teaches you what to do when love starts dying without saying a word. There isn't a manual for when your marriage fades in silence, when the person who used to be your home becomes the person you can't reach anymore. It doesn't happen in one moment. It happens slowly, like erosion, a long grind that wears down the edges of your heart until you barely recognize the shape of what used to be us. By 2005, my marriage wasn't exploding, it was evaporating. I felt like I was holding on to someone who was already halfway gone, drifting out of the life we built together. You try everything, staying calm, being patient, working harder, sacrificing more. But it's like grabbing a rope covered in oil. The harder you hold on, the faster it slips through your fingers. People assume distance is physical, but emotional distance, that shit will kill you long before geography ever does. I was thousands of miles away, even when I was standing in the same room with her. And yet, because I loved her, because I believed marriage was a promise, because I still saw the woman she used to be, I kept trying. What broke me wasn't anger, it was confusion. It was that helpless feeling of watching someone you love quietly walk out of the relationship without ever saying, I'm leaving. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? How did we go from a family to this? And the shittiest part? I didn't have the courage to admit to myself that I already knew the answer. We were done. I just hadn't accepted it yet. The worst part of any deployment isn't the danger, it's the goodbye. In 2005, when I had to figure out what to do with my kids, it wasn't a logistical problem. It was a fucking heartbreak. I'd already missed pieces of their lives after my first deployment. I'd already been the dad who disappears because the army decides it's time. And now, because of orders to Germany with no concurrent travel, I had to do it again. And it destroyed me. Imagine packing your children's bags knowing damn well you're not coming back for months. Imagine hugging them while pretending everything is okay because they're too young to understand what this kind of distance does to a relationship. Imagine putting your own babies in someone else's care and trusting the world with the most precious things you have because you don't have a choice. That's the part of military service nobody likes to talk about. They talk about patriotism, courage, duty, but they don't talk about the sick feeling in your stomach when the car pulls away. They don't talk about how heavy your heart feels for weeks afterward. They don't talk about the guilt that sticks to your skin no matter how many missions you complete. People think war steals time from soldiers, but it steals time from our kids too, time they can never get back. And the truth is, those little goodbyes never leave you. Years later, they still echo. If there's ever a year I can pinpoint where everything changed, it's 2005. It didn't explode like a crisis. It eroded like slow damage. Every month pulled me farther away from who I used to be. Every conversation with my wife felt colder. Every day away from my kids felt like a piece of me was peeling off. And then the orders to Germany came, and it felt like the universe was telling me, you're not in control. Buckle up. I tried to reverse the orders. I begged for a way to bring my kids. I pleaded for more time. The Army doesn't care about personal lives. It cares about manpower and mission. And as my life was cracking open, the military machine turned without even noticing. That's how I found myself preparing to leave the country again. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Not because I was ready, but because readiness didn't matter. Inside, I was a mess. Outside, I was a sergeant first class who didn't have the luxury of falling apart. This was the last chapter of who I used to be, the version of me before Germany, before the girl with the red rose photo, before the night at the Quantum Bar, before Ramadi, before the Outcast platoon, before the explosions, and before the sniper fire. It was the last moment before the war took the pieces I had left and scattered them across the desert. Most people walk around believing a bullshit idea about men, that we don't feel as deeply, that heartbreak hits us softer, or that we somehow walk through emotional wreckage untouched. People think men compartmentalize everything, like we're machines. They think love doesn't break us and loneliness doesn't kill us slowly from the inside. But here's the truth. Men bleed quietly. Men break silently. And men love just as hard, sometimes harder, than anyone gives us credit for. In every love story people celebrate, the movies, the books, the quotes, the world assumes men are the stoic pillars, the ones who stand strong while the woman carries all the emotional weight. It's funny, because the whole time I was living through the darkest parts of my life, I was carrying emotions that would flatten most people. And I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because it's the truth most men never speak. That's why I start here. Not with the gunfire, not with the explosions, not with Ramadi or the war or the chaos that came later, but with the heart. My heart. The part nobody ever asks about and nobody ever tries to understand. Because the part that came before the war, that part is important. It shapes everything. It explains everything. It gives meaning to what happened after. Before the battlefield hardened me, loneliness softened me in ways I wasn't ready for. Before Iraq tested my body, life tested my heart. Before November 11th, 2006 broke me, something else had already cracked me open and left me exposed. I wasn't a cold soldier when I landed in Iraq. I was a human being, a father, a husband holding on to something already slipping away, a man trying not to drown in his own chest. People see veterans years later and assume we were shaped entirely by the war. They think all our scars began in Iraq or Afghanistan. They think what hardened us was the blast waves and sniper fire and the day-to-day grind of combat. But for me, the emotional shrapnel started long before I ever put my boots down in Ramadi. I didn't enter the military as a blank slate. Nobody does. We all carry the ghosts of where we came from. By the time I got to 2005, by the time the divorce started forming, by the time I was saying goodbye to my kids again, by the time I was preparing to leave for Germany, I was already carrying PTSD from my first deployment, the psychological residue of the MST incident, a marriage held together by threads, the guilt of leaving my kids more times than any father should, a loneliness that felt like gravity pulling my chest inward. The military teaches you how to absorb hits, but life hits harder than the battlefield sometimes. That's the part people don't see, and that's why this story has to be told, so that people understand that before soldiers ever step into combat, they're already in the middle of a different kind of war at home, one that nobody trains them for. When I first arrived at the Welcome Center in Gießen, I felt like a ghost stepping into someone else's life. I remember the cold fluorescent lights, the echo of boots on tile, and that hollow feeling in my chest, the kind that only comes from being far from home, far from love, and far from anything familiar. They handed me a room key like it meant something, like it was supposed to unlock a new beginning. But beginnings don't start with keys. They start with what you carry inside. And what I was carrying was loneliness. I took my bags into the room and laid them on the bed, neatly, like I always do, and then just stood there. It hit me that I had nobody. No wife in my corner, no kids running up to hug me, no family waiting to welcome me. Just a plain room with plain walls and a plain bed. And somehow, that emptiness made the room feel even smaller. So I walked out. I couldn't sit in that silence. I grabbed a cab and told the driver the first thing that came to my mind. Take me to the nearest Asian restaurant. And that's how my first night in Germany began. Not with excitement or adventure, but with hunger, exhaustion, and a quiet ache I didn't want to admit I felt. After dinner, walking alone down the cold streets of Gießen, I wasn't looking for meaning. I wasn't looking for signs. Hell, I wasn't even looking for hope. But it found me anyway. I was passing storefronts, most closed, some glowing with soft yellow light, when I stopped in front of a photo shop window. And that's when I saw it. A black and white photograph of a woman holding a red rose. It hit me harder than I expected. There was something in her expression, soft, mysterious, almost sad, that reached into me. It was like the photo understood the loneliness I'd been pretending I didn't feel. Her eyes weren't just beautiful, they were familiar in a way that didn't make sense. I stood there longer than I probably should have, staring at this stranger's face like she was someone I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. And I remember saying out loud, quietly, almost embarrassed, God, I wish I could meet someone like her. It wasn't desperation, it wasn't fantasy, it was a wish, simple, honest, vulnerable. A wish from a man who just wanted someone to choose him back. I didn't know then that I was speaking something into existence. I didn't know that life was listening. I didn't know that the universe had already set something into motion. All I knew was that for the first time in months, I felt a small flicker of hope, the kind you don't trust, but you can't ignore. After leaving the photo, I walked the city aimlessly. I wasn't sightseeing. I was avoiding going back to that empty room. The streets twisted around me, unfamiliar and winding, until eventually I realized I had no idea where the hell I was. It was getting dark, colder, quieter. And then I saw it. A small bar on a corner, tucked into an old building with stone walls. The sign said Quantum. I didn't know then that this bar would become the crossroads of my life. Inside, the atmosphere was pure German pub. Dark stained wood, old men rolling dice, the sound of laughter and glass tapping against tables. It felt like a place with history, like a place where stories didn't just happen, they lingered. A little blonde bartender looked up at me and smiled politely. She served me a beer, but I wasn't really there to drink. I just needed to breathe somewhere that didn't remind me how alone I was. I felt out of place, an American soldier with a broken marriage, standing in a bar full of strangers living their ordinary lives. After a few minutes, I asked her where the nearest cab stop was. She pointed me toward the McDonald's downtown. I walked back to my room alone, but something inside me felt different, like the night wasn't done with me yet, like Germany had more to show me, like maybe that photo wasn't just a coincidence. Christmas arrived with more emptiness than cheer. I couldn't afford a ticket back home, and Tua said she bought one, but she gave me the wrong flight information. Whether it was a mistake or intentional, I still don't know. All I knew was that when the plane left without me on it, something inside me finally accepted the truth. She didn't want me there. And that hurt more than anything war ever threw at me. I spent Christmas alone in Germany. No family, no wife, no kids. Just me and the echo of everything falling apart. PTSD was already whispering in the back of my mind. My marriage was dead. I just hadn't buried it yet. All I wanted, all I had ever wanted, was someone who wanted me as I was. Someone who could look past the parts of me I couldn't fix, couldn't control, couldn't escape. I didn't know it yet, but that someone was already waiting in a place I hadn't returned to. A place called Andy's. 2 weeks later, something pulled me back downtown. Maybe boredom, maybe loneliness, maybe fate nudging me forward. I went to get a tattoo touched up at a shop called Andy's, and that's where everything shifted. A brunette bartender behind the counter smiled at me, and for the first time in months, I felt something in my chest wake up. We talked. Not small talk, not polite conversation. We talked like two people who had been waiting unknowingly for that moment. There was something magnetic about her, warm, inviting, alive. We talked for hours, and when I left, I knew I had to see her again. So I did, and each time felt better than the last. She took me out dancing, tequila shots, music pounding, laughter breaking through the armor I didn't even realize I was still wearing. She pulled me onto the dance floor like she had known me forever. Then I spilled wine on my pants, completely accidental, and she told me to take them off so she could soak them. No hesitation, no awkwardness. She took a shower while I waited, nervous and alive at the same time. She seduced me that night, but more importantly, she made me feel wanted, the kind of wanted I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, she cooked breakfast, kissed me softly, and headed to work. I walked her there just to spend a few more minutes with her. And then we passed the photo shop. The same photo, the same woman, the woman holding the red rose. And she looked at me with pride and said, "That's me." My heart stopped. I had wished for her face, for her spirit, for her presence. And somehow, impossible as it sounds, I found her. Or maybe she found me. There's a moment in every soldier's life when the world splits in two. One version of your life, the one filled with warmth, hope, and human connection, stands on one side. And the other version, the life of uniform, duty, danger, and sacrifice, stands on the opposite end, pulling you away whether you want it to or not. For me, that dividing line was the day I had to leave her. Up until that point, Germany had given me something I didn't think I would ever feel again: hope. Not just romantic hope, but the kind of hope that reminds you that you're still human, still capable of being seen and wanted and chosen. She wasn't just a woman I met in a bar. She was a moment of light in a part of my life that had been dark for too damn long. But soldiers don't get to keep hope, not for long. Orders cut through your life like a blade. There's no negotiation, no pause button, no, can I have just one more week with her? When the unit ramped up for deployment, everything changed overnight. Guys were disappearing on Christmas leave, bags were being packed, trucks serviced, briefings thrown at me faster than I could absorb them. It didn't matter that I hadn't even gotten my household goods yet. It didn't matter that I barely understood the unit's mission. It didn't matter that I had a life outside the uniform. The army doesn't wait for your heart to catch up. I saw her the night before everything shifted. We didn't talk about goodbye. We didn't even want to breathe the word. She held me, and it felt like she was holding on to something that was already slipping out of her fingers. Part of me wanted to stay. Part of me wanted to fight the orders. Part of me wanted to rewrite the damn world just to keep her. But soldiers don't get to stay. We leave. And the worst part is the moment you realize she understands that. The quiet, resigned look in her eyes that says, I knew you were temporary. That shit hits harder than any IED. I walked her to work one last time, passed the photo of her holding the red rose one last time, kissed her goodbye one last time. And just like that, the love story ended not with a breakup, but with deployment orders. I didn't know if she'd wait. I didn't know if she'd write. I didn't know if any of it meant what I thought it meant. All I knew was that by the time I got my household goods, we were already on a plane to Iraq. When the ramp dropped in Iraq, everything hit me at once. The dry heat, the smell of dust and jet fuel, the chaos of soldiers unloading equipment, the unknown ahead of us. The only certainty was this: the hope I found in Germany stayed behind. The war was waiting for me here. We moved out to Tal Afar, and that became our first stop. The city was scarred, tense, and unpredictable, a place where every alley felt like it was watching you back. We did the usual jobs at first: basic guard duty, small construction projects, filling gaps, pulling shifts. Nothing glamorous, nothing heroic, just the grind. I'd barely gotten my footing when the battalion CSM walked in and decided to rearrange my entire world. He pulled me out of Alpha Company and sent me to Bravo. No explanation, no warning, just, you're the new platoon sergeant. And that's how I walked into a group of guys I had never seen before. A platoon already shaped, already bonded, already carrying its own reputation like a badge and a warning label. And that reputation? The Outcast platoon. Perfect. My first week with them should have been a honeymoon phase, but instead it felt more like a disciplinary hearing from hell. 2 guys were marched in front of the commander for drug use. Not weed, not something stupid. Volume from an interpreter. The interpreter himself stood there shaking like he was about to meet God early. And as soon as Captain Nar realized what had happened, he snapped. He pulled his weapon, shoved it toward the guy's head, and barked. Captain Nar was a short, stout man with a stern jawbone, and he looked just like our company motto, a bulldog. You gave my guys drugs? Get the fuck off this post. The interpreter damn near pissed himself. I escorted him off the post and walked back to my container thinking, fuck. This is what I came here for? This? That was my introduction to being a platoon sergeant again. No orientation, no warm welcome, just chaos. And the platoon? Jesus Christ. Picture the cast of Stripes with Bill Murray. Now picture them with real weapons, in a real war, in a real city where people were trying to kill us daily. Every other platoon had polished NCOs, squared away soldiers, and structure. Mine had a reputation for being the problem children, the misfits, the wild cards, the guys nobody wanted to deal with. And there I was, their brand new platoon sergeant, dropped in like some kind of punishment from the universe. But I'll say this, even in that moment, even standing in front of them thinking, what the fuck did I walk into? I also saw something else. Potential. Grit. Fight. Heart. Fire. These weren't bad soldiers. They were misunderstood, untamed, unpolished weapons that nobody wanted to sharpen. And deep down, I knew why I was there. Because sometimes misfits need a misfit leader. I didn't know it yet, but this group, the Outcast platoon, would become the best damn soldiers I could have gone to war with. Leadership doesn't start the day you sign the paperwork. It starts the moment the universe decides to test you. Usually when you're exhausted, unprepared, and asking yourself why the fuck you ever agreed to this job again. With the Outcast platoon, that test came fast. The first time they watched me, waiting to see what I'd do. The day after the interpreter incident, I walked into the motor pool to find the entire platoon staring at me like I was some kind of alien that crash landed in their AO. They weren't being disrespectful. They were evaluating me. Not my rank, not my combat patch, not the stripes on my chest. Me. Soldiers can smell bullshit the same way dogs can sense fear. They were looking for two things. Was I weak? Was I fake? I could feel it in the way they stopped talking when I approached, the way they leaned on the hoods of their trucks, arms crossed, grease on their uniforms, dust on their boots. Not a formation in sight, nobody pretending to be squared away for the new guy. This was them at 100% authenticity. I respected that. But I also knew this. If I didn't lead them right, they'd eat me alive. Not out of malice, out of survival. Because in Iraq, a bad leader is a liability, and liabilities get people killed. The first conflict, the shower incident. My first real test came in the stupidest way imaginable, through a damn shower call. The first sergeant called me into his chew like it was a major crisis. He stood there in civilian shorts and a t-shirt, pissed off about a soldier from my platoon walking to the showers out of uniform. He wanted to hammer the kid with an Article 15. I looked at the one SG, looked at his running shorts, looked at the flip-flops on his feet, and said, Top, you're standing here in fucking gym shorts. No, the fuck, you're not. I've got him. This is my platoon. It stunned him, not because I was disrespectful, but because I was right. Word spreads fast in a platoon. By chow that evening, every soldier knew exactly how that conversation went, and something changed. Not instantly, not dramatically, but enough. They realized I wasn't there to burn them. I wasn't a robot. I wasn't a scared leader clinging to the rule book. I was someone who would protect them, even from the chain of command when necessary. That matters in combat. It matters a lot. The outcasts watching. After that, the platoon looked at me differently. Not like a new NCO who wandered into the wrong unit by mistake, but like someone who might actually belong there. They still tested me. They still watched me. They still threw their edges at me to see if I could handle them. But I could feel a shift. Respect isn't given. It's earned in the quiet moments, the ones nobody writes about in awards or citations. And the outcast platoon respected only one kind of leader, one who stood with them, not above them. First taste of danger. But before we ever bonded, the war reminded us exactly where we were. Small arms fire in the distance, mortars landing near the wire, IED blasts echoing across Tal Afar like thunder you could feel in your bones. The outcast platoon didn't flinch, not once. They weren't polished, they weren't pretty, they weren't the posters the army used for recruiting, but they were fucking warriors. And deep down, even before we really knew each other, I felt something I hadn't felt in years.
I belonged. Not because I was perfect, not because I had all the answers, but because I was one of them. A misfit leading misfits in a war that didn't care what our pasts were. This wasn't Germany anymore. This wasn't the love story. This wasn't the life I thought I'd have. This was the beginning of something brutal, raw, and unforgettable. And none of us had any idea how far into hell we were about to go together.
There's a moment in every platoon where the soldiers stop looking at you like a stranger and start looking at you like someone they can count on, even if they won't admit it, and even if it's buried under layers of sarcasm, bullshit, and military dark humor. For the Outcast platoon, that moment didn't come during a firefight. It didn't come from medals or speeches or some heroic act. It came from simple, unglamorous, unrecognized leadership. The 1SG with the Article 15 obsession. Word travels faster than the wind on a FOB. By the second week, everyone knew about the first sergeant, a man who wrote more Article 15s than emails, the kind of guy who believed discipline was something you enforced with paperwork, like a weapon you pulled out of a holster. His reputation? He'll burn you over anything. The soldiers hated it. It made them nervous, jumpy, constantly looking over their shoulder for petty infractions instead of scanning the horizon for actual threats. And that's when I realized something important. They didn't need another enforcer. They needed an advocate. They needed someone who understood that soldiers aren't machines. They're kids with rifles, hearts, trauma, humor, pain, and hope all jammed into one body. Your first real act of leadership. It came earlier than I expected. One afternoon in Tal Afar, the first sergeant called me over again. Another issue. Another potential Article 15. This time, one of my soldiers had been late forming up because he overslept. Not because he was lazy, not because he didn't care, because the kid was fucking exhausted, working 16-hour days, pulling guard shifts, adjusting to combat life. I walked with him to the CHU. The first sergeant was already lecturing, ready to make an example out of him. I stopped him. Top, we're at war, I said. He's tired, not insubordinate. I'll handle it. Top stared at me, pissed that I wasn't falling in line, pissed that I wasn't letting him crush another junior soldier over something meaningless. But he didn't push it. Not that day. And the kid? He looked at me like I had just saved his goddamn life. In a way, maybe I did. The Outcasts' shift in attitude. After that incident, I could feel the platoon's energy shift. Not in words. Outcasts don't talk like that. Not in salutes. Discipline wasn't our strength. Not in meetings. Nobody was about to compliment the new PSG. But in the little things. They stood nearer when I briefed missions. They cracked jokes in my direction instead of behind my back. They listened, really listened, when I talked tactics. They stopped testing every weakness and started showing their strengths. They were misfits, but they were my misfits now. The Outcast platoon wasn't a problem. It was a weapon nobody knew how to use. They needed direction, not punishment. They needed someone to see past the rough edges. They needed someone who understood what it meant to be an outcast, too. Your leadership style takes shape. Here's the thing about leading a misfit crew. You don't mold them into something they're not. You sharpen them into the version of themselves that can survive war. I didn't try to turn them into parade soldiers. I didn't demand perfection. I didn't choke them with rules designed for garrison life. Instead, I focused on what mattered. Loyalty, skill, communication, courage, accountability that comes from respect, not fear. Some leaders think discipline makes a soldier. I think trust does. When someone trusts you, truly trusts you, they'll follow you into hell with their boots unlaced. And that's exactly what we were marching toward. Foreshadowing the storm. You can feel it in certain places, the tension, the quiet, the way the air just hangs. Tal Afar had that feeling, like something huge was building under the surface. Every day, distant explosions echoed. Every day, the intel briefs got darker. Every day, we heard rumors. Ramadi, the hottest area in Iraq, the place everyone feared,
the place where the fight was real, ruthless, and unforgiving. And even though we didn't know it yet, that was where we were headed. The Outcast platoon wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. No one is ever ready. But destiny doesn't give a shit about readiness. It just drags you forward. And that's what was happening. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. The Outcasts were becoming a family. A flawed, insane, unpredictable family. But a family that would face the worst days of our lives together. And I was becoming their leader. Whether I liked it or not, whether I believed it or not, whether anyone else thought I could do it or not. Sometimes you don't choose your platoon. Sometimes the universe chooses it for you.
Little by little, the atmosphere around us changed. Intel briefings got darker. Missions became heavier. Rumors started spreading about units being torn apart down south. Everyone knew something big was coming, something worse than Tal Afar. Even the outcasts went quiet during chow sometimes. That's when you know soldiers are thinking. That's when you know shit is getting real. One night, while the platoon was doing vehicle PMCS under the dim light of chem sticks and dusty headlamps, it hit me. These guys weren't preparing trucks. They were preparing each other, checking gear, checking weapons, checking the guy next to them without making a big deal out of it. The brotherhood wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, instinctive, unspoken. And I watched them thinking, these kids are braver than they realize, braver than I ever gave them credit for, braver than me most days. I wasn't leading some broken platoon. I was leading a group of warriors who had been underestimated for too damn long. Humility in the face of what was coming. I'll be honest, I wasn't confident. Not yet. Not fully. I didn't show it because they needed a steady hand, but I felt it. Not fear, not self-doubt, just the weight of responsibility. And the truth? They deserved better than I knew how to be at the time. But they gave me something rare, time to grow into the leader they needed. They didn't expect perfection. They didn't want a textbook NCO. They wanted someone who'd stand there with them, shoulder to shoulder, even when everything went to hell. And I could do that, even if I wasn't perfect, especially because I wasn't perfect. The humility wasn't an act. It was real. Because these soldiers, my soldiers, were braver than I was ready for. They didn't know it yet, neither did I. But that humility was the only reason we would survive what was waiting for us in Ramadi. There comes a point in every deployment when you know the training wheels are coming off. And for us, that moment was the convoy to Ramadi. We didn't talk much on that movement. Nobody joked, nobody slept, nobody pretended. Each of us sat inside our trucks, feeling the weight of something we couldn't quite name yet. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was that strange, quiet tension soldiers get when they know the next phase is going to be different, harder, darker, more real. Ramadi wasn't just another city. Everybody knew that. Even before the intel briefs, even before the rumors, even before the first blast, the name alone carried weight. You didn't have to be told it was dangerous. You could feel it in the way people said the name. Ramadi. It wasn't a place. It was a warning. We convoyed in. Long hours, dust clouds, gun trucks spaced out, radios crackling every few minutes with updates or warnings. And as we approached the outskirts, the world changed. Tal Afar had been tense, but Ramadi felt haunted. Buildings pocked with bullet holes, burned out husks of vehicles on the roadside, windows boarded, shattered, or covered with blankets. The streets too empty, too silent, too still. You don't need a brief to know you're entering a battlefield. Your instincts tell you before your brain does. The reserve unit we replaced. A shit sandwich, as the old saying goes. The first thing we saw when we rolled onto the fob was the unit we were replacing, a reserve engineer element out of the States. Good men, good hearts. But you could see the exhaustion on their faces before they even opened their mouths. They weren't walking around like confident veterans. They were walking around like survivors. These guys had been through hell in ways they never expected. No fancy equipment, no robust support, half the resources they needed, double the danger. When we first met them, there was a moment where everyone just watched each other silently, a kind of unspoken acknowledgement between warriors. They were leaving the fire. We were walking into it. It's hard to explain what that looks like unless you've seen it. Their eyes said everything. Not fear, but fatigue, the kind that sinks into a man's bones. They weren't giving us a polished handoff. They were handing us the pieces of a broken battlefield. And the truth they didn't say out loud, but we all felt, was this: we barely held on here. One of the old 25th ID CSMs once said, "When you replace someone at a job, it always feels like you get handed a shit sandwich." He was right. But this wasn't a sandwich. It was a whole buffet. Where they went wrong and why it wasn't their fault. Most people don't understand how war works. They think courage compensates for lack of training. They think heart compensates for lack of resources. They think support the troops automatically means someone is supporting them logistically. That's not how combat works. These reserve guys were sent into one of the hottest cities in Iraq with not enough up-armored vehicles, not enough personnel, not enough route clearance tools, not enough ISR, not enough experience with urban insurgency, not enough support. And the enemy in Ramadi? They were not amateurs. They weren't the sloppy bomb makers we saw in other AOs. These were organized, patient, skilled insurgents using coordinated tactics. The reserve unit never stood a chance, and none of that was because they weren't brave. They were brave as hell, probably braver than they were trained to be, but they were bleeding, and they knew it. So when we arrived, the handoff wasn't smooth. It was rushed, fragmented, messy, and filled with warning signs they didn't even sugarcoat. Stay on base when you can. One of their senior guys pulled me aside during a right seat ride and said, "If you don't have to be out there, don't. This place will eat your platoon alive." And he wasn't dramatizing. He meant it literally. These men had been blown up so many times they stopped counting. They stopped patrolling during daylight. They stayed inside the wire unless absolutely necessary. And you know what? I didn't blame them. When support fails you, caution becomes survival. And they were still alive, which means their caution wasn't cowardice. It was experience. But the 16th Engineer Battalion wasn't sent to Ramadi to hide. We were sent there to break the enemy's hold on the city. And that meant one thing: going where the reserve unit couldn't go anymore. The first post-blast call in Ramadi hit me harder than I expected. Not because of what we saw, but because of what it felt like. There's a moment in every deployment when war stops being a concept and becomes a physical thing, something you can taste, smell, and feel vibrating in your bones. For me, that moment happened on an Iraqi highway with a burning Chevy Suburban, a dead checkpoint, and a sky that looked too damn normal for what was in front of us. We had just wrapped up our right seat ride with the outgoing unit. They were showing us the routines, the roads, the danger spots, the kind of handover training that's supposed to prepare you for what's coming. But nothing prepares you for the first time you step out into a real post-blast. We rolled up, dust swirling around the convoy, and there it was, a Chevrolet Suburban, or what was left of one. The entire vehicle looked like someone had taken a giant fist and punched it inward, then set the whole thing on fire. Mortar rounds had been packed into the back, wired to detonate on impact, and the thing had blown itself apart at the checkpoint like a demon exhaling. The Iraqi soldiers manning the checkpoint never stood a chance. The driver? He'd been blown clean out of the front windshield and thrown yards ahead, just a broken, burnt shape on the asphalt. And the smell. People don't talk about the smell enough. They talk about explosions, firefights, adrenaline, but not the part that sticks with you longest. The smell of a VBIED isn't just smoke. It's burning rubber, burning oil, burning cloth. And mixed into all of it is the faint, sickening hint of burning flesh. Once you smell it, you know it forever. I call it BBQ Haji, not out of disrespect, but because soldiers use humor to survive. If you don't make jokes, the darkness eats you alive. As we secured the area, I kept thinking about the driver, not the terror cell behind him, the man himself. Half the bombers weren't volunteers. They were poor bastards threatened with their families' lives, or mentally unstable people used like cattle. There was no glory in anything these insurgents did, no bravery, no honor. They hid behind children, forced people to kill themselves, built bombs in family homes, and walked away without a second thought. This job, this mission, this war, it was ugly, it was cruel. It didn't care who you were or what you believed. And on that day, looking at the ruined vehicle and the bodies of the Iraqi soldiers, I realized something about Ramadi. This city wasn't going to teach us slowly. It was going to punch us in the mouth from day one. The enemy owned the roads. They owned the tempo. They controlled the fear. And we were stepping right into their front yard with brand new vehicles, half-trained crews, and 1,000 things still left to learn. But here's the truth. The soldiers around me didn't flinch. They secured the site. They communicated clearly. They pulled perimeter like professionals. They handled the chaos like they'd been doing it for years. I remember standing there thinking, these kids are better than me, and they're the only reason I'll make it home. That was the moment I stopped pretending I had all the answers. That was the moment I became a real platoon sergeant again. Not because I knew everything, but because I finally understood that leadership wasn't about ego, rank, or being the smartest guy in the room. It was about humility. It was about responsibility. It was about being strong for them, not because of them. And it was about understanding that the war had already begun, whether I was ready or not. The next moment that shaped me in Ramadi didn't come with a warning, a countdown, or any sign from God that things were about to go sideways. It showed up the way war usually does, suddenly, violently, without mercy or rhythm. One second we were rolling, the next, we were in it. It happened during a recovery mission. The brigade commander's MMWV had been hit earlier by an improvised rocket launcher, an IRL, basically a PVC pipe stuffed with a mortar or RPG round, hidden in rubble or an opening in a wall. A cheap, homemade weapon with deadly intentions. And it had punched into the commander's vehicle during a right seat ride with the outgoing unit. So they told my platoon, go pick up the commander, recover his vehicle, don't fuck it up. The kind of no-pressure mission bullshit you get used to after a while. A master sergeant came with us, one of those VIP babysitters from battalion who wanted to make sure nothing failed. His presence didn't calm anyone down, it just added weight. Everyone acts different when someone with stripes that high climbs into your truck. Even the air gets tense. We took Route Ice Cream, a narrow, shitty road with terrible visibility, and halfway through the route, it happened. The enemy hit us. And not the distant, echoing gunfire you sometimes hear in the city. Not the random pop, pop, pop from across the river. This was different. This was aimed at us. We heard the first crack, the loud, violent snap of a high-caliber round breaking the sound barrier, and then the full chorus hit. Machine gun fire, RPGs launching, rounds smacking the pavement around us. One round hit the street 5 meters in front of my truck. I saw the concrete jump. I knew instantly, we are engaged. This is real. This is happening. Training ranges don't prepare you for the sound. At a range, you hear shots in front of you. Predictable, organized, clean. But in an urban ambush, everything becomes chaos. Rounds bounce off walls, ricochet down alleys, scream past you unpredictably. Sound bounces and multiplies. You lose all sense of direction. You can't tell where the shooter is. You can't tell how many. You can't tell how close death is. The gunner in my vehicle dropped down inside the truck, not out of cowardice, but survival. On route clearance, gunners kept their heads down because one explosion could decapitate them. Popping up meant risking your skull for a shot you might not even get off before the next RPG hit. So we pushed through the kill zone. No returning fire, no dramatic counterattack. Just pure survival instincts, just movement, forward, faster. The master sergeant with us didn't say a word. Nobody did. We were too busy staying alive. When we finally broke out of the ambush and the firing tapered off behind us, nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. It wasn't a movie moment. It was just a reminder. Ramadi wasn't going to give us warm-ups.
It was going to hit us full force from day one. Sink or swim, live or die, learn fast or get buried. We reached the commander, recovered his vehicle, the entire front end shredded, and loaded it up. The commander, in full commander fashion, told us, "Let's go back down Route Michigan. I want to see where I got hit." Of course he did. Why take the safe road when you can go sightseeing through an ambush area? So we went, because that's what you do. We rolled past the building where the IRL had been hidden, a piece of PVC pipe sticking out of a small hole in the wall. That stupid pipe changed the entire direction of our week. Back on base, we gave our reports. The master sergeant shook our hands. The adrenaline wore off. And I realized something profound. I wasn't scared. I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't frozen. My soldiers had snapped into action instantly. Professional, calm, coordinated, focused. They didn't need a perfect platoon sergeant. They needed someone who could keep up with them. And on that road, under fire, I learned I could, even if I had a lot left to learn.
Our first real route clearance mission wasn't heroic. It wasn't clean. It wasn't even coordinated perfectly. It was messy, tense, and full of uncertainty, exactly what Ramadi specialized in serving up. It happened at night, like most of our clearance missions did. The roads were quieter after dark, fewer civilians, fewer distractions, fewer chances for a vehicle to roll right into a blast zone we were trying to secure. But the enemy knew the same thing. Nighttime was a trade. Less chaos, more trapdoors. We rolled out like we always did, the RG-31 up front. That vehicle was a beast, tall, heavy, awkward, and ugly as hell. But it was built for the exact hell we were driving into. We were moving slow, scanning potholes, looking for disturbed earth, wires, loose trash piles, anything out of place. Then it happened, a bright flash, a concussion that slapped the night, a thundering boom that punched every one of us in the chest. The RG-31 lifted off the ground and slammed sideways, landing on its side like a knocked-out heavyweight fighter. I told my driver, "Move forward, get me up there." From where I was sitting, I didn't see how anybody could be alive. The violence of that blast felt biblical. You don't see a vehicle that large, thrown like a toy, and expect good news. I pushed open my door and did my 5 and 25. Quick check of immediate threats, then extended check, heart pounding, senses sharpened by adrenaline and fear. Then I climbed up onto the RG-31. Dust was still floating like smoke. Metal was still pinging hot. The night was too quiet for what had just happened. Inside, I saw SGT Jackson lying on his side. The gunner had been thrown into the radio mount. The driver was still strapped in by his seatbelt, stunned, frozen, but alive. Alive. All three of them were alive. I checked each one. Breathing, yes. Bleeding, yes, but manageable. Conscious, mostly. I laid the gunner inside my Cougar, and my guys worked fast, efficient, and calm, like they'd rehearsed this very moment every day since birth. But they hadn't. Nobody rehearses this. You just go. As I stood there, hand on the hot metal of that destroyed RG-31, I realized something with absolute clarity. Someone somewhere spent money on that vehicle so these 3 kids didn't die tonight. And thank God they did. We called recovery assets. Lel T. Johnson, young, brilliant, quick thinking, coordinated the response like a surgeon calling out orders. It was the first time I saw how sharp he was under chaos, and I respected the hell out of him from that moment on. The gunner got sent back to Germany. Jackson and the driver stayed in the fight. They could have chosen to go home. They could have claimed TBI or shock or trauma, and nobody would have blamed them. But they stayed. That's something civilians will never fully understand. Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier does is get back in the truck the day after it tried to kill him. I thought about Jackson a lot after that, about the decision he made to keep going, about the cost he paid later for that loyalty. But that night, standing in the dark, touching a ripped-apart RG-31 that had protected its crew like a guardian angel made of steel, I knew something that wasn't clear before. The enemy wanted us dead.
The equipment wanted us alive. And between those two forces, we would fight every single day.
Route Michigan was the artery of Ramadi, a long, scarred, hostile stretch of road that cut through the city like a wound someone kept ripping open. Most units avoided it during the day because the sunlight didn't help you see danger better. It helped the enemy see you. But engineers don't get that luxury. We had missions that couldn't wait for nightfall. Construction, clearing, infrastructure support, escort, post-blast. And sometimes the only way to accomplish any of that was in broad daylight, where snipers treated Route Michigan like their personal hunting ground. Our roads were full of potholes, giant craters, broken asphalt, gouges where IEDs had detonated before. And each one of those holes was a perfect spot for the enemy to reseed another explosive. If we didn't fill them, they filled them with bombs. So the Seabees, Navy construction engineers, got called in to repair the road, and we escorted them. People don't understand how dangerous that was. Infantry guys on the cops could choose when to patrol. We didn't have that option. While some soldiers pulled guard duty behind walls, the Seabees were out there in the open, unloading equipment, shoveling rock, filling holes, literally standing on top of the ground the enemy used to hide bombs. And on our side, we had to protect them. 2 gun trucks parked behind them in a V-shape, weapons trained on every threat point. Another set up front, dismounts pulling 360, watching rooftops, watching alleyways, watching shadows. The Seabees didn't have cover. No walls, no sandbags, just their gear, their helmets, and the hope that we saw the threat before it saw them. That takes guts most people will never understand. It wasn't even their war the same way it was ours. They weren't infantry. They weren't route clearance. They weren't EOD. They were builders, fixers, construction specialists. And they still stepped onto that kill zone every damn day. This is what people forget. Bravery doesn't always hold a rifle. Sometimes it holds a shovel. There was a moment during one of these missions where I really understood how deadly this work was. The Seabees had just lost a female sailor a few weeks earlier, hit by either a sniper or an IRL round. They were shaken, but they still showed up. They still filled the holes. They still stood on the most dangerous stretch of road in the city. We worked with them closely. We kept them alive. And they kept Route Michigan from turning into a permanent minefield. We didn't lose a single Seabee on our watch, not one. Not because the enemy wasn't trying, not because the road was safe, but because my soldiers, my outcasts, were some of the sharpest, fastest, most protective warriors in the entire damn Anbar province. Every second on that road was a gamble. Every minute was borrowed time. But we did it anyway, because the mission needed it, because the war demanded it, because people's lives depended on it. And because deep down, we all knew something true, something nobody ever says out loud. Sometimes the most dangerous missions aren't the ones full of gunfire. They're the ones where you have to stand still. There are moments in war where everything slows down. Not because time actually slows, but because your mind zooms in on a single detail, a single image, a single instant where life and death meet in the space of a breath. For me, one of those moments happened on a route clearance mission at night. We were already on edge. Nighttime always made Ramadi feel like a living thing, hiding in the dark, waiting for us to slip. We were moving slow, scanning the roads, watching for disturbed earth, wires, shadows that looked too still, trash piles that weren't there yesterday. Our Husky hit an illumination round, an artillery shell designed to light up the battlefield. When it detonated, the entire world went white for a second, brighter than a camera flash, brighter than headlights, brighter than anything you expect to see in the dead of night. We froze. For a moment, even the enemy must have thought we triggered some kind of explosive charge. It was that bright, that violent, that sudden. And then, as if the flash was a signal flare, 2 insurgents stepped out of an alley to our north. I saw one of them lift his rifle. I saw the shape of it. I saw the stance, practiced, confident. And then he fired, right at my face. All I saw was cracks. The bullet hit the ballistic glass in front of me, exploding cracks outward like a spider web. Then another round hit, another impact, another starburst shattering across the glass.
The rounds came so fast that my brain couldn't separate them. It just felt like someone was throwing bricks at my eyes. If that glass wasn't there, I would have been done. Dead. Head blown open. Lights out in the middle of a rock. The gunner scrambled to engage, and once he got his weapon up, the two insurgents disappeared into the night like ghosts. That's how they operated. Hit fast, vanish faster. We didn't chase them. You don't chase shadows in Ramadi. That's how you end up in the morgue. But sitting in that truck, staring at the cracked glass inches from my face, I felt something heavy settle inside me. Not fear, not relief, just clarity. This war wasn't personal until that moment. Now it was. Someone tried to kill me. Not us, not the convoy. Me. He aimed at my head. He pulled the trigger. He wanted to watch me die. And the only reason I didn't was because of 2 inches of ballistic glass and the fact that my gunner reacted fast enough to scare them off. After the blast, after the shooting, after the sniper vanished, we reset, recovered, and kept going. Because route clearance doesn't stop when you get shot at. It continues until the road is clear or the mission is done. But inside, something shifted. I started scanning harder, watching rooftops, watching alleys, watching anything that could hide a sniper. I became a hard target, always ready, always moving, always acting like someone had their scope on me. Because chances were, someone did. People look at route clearance and think the bombs are the danger. But the truth is this: they wait for the bomb. They wait for the blast. Then they shoot the survivors. You clear IEDs long enough, you learn this. Snipers don't shoot the first guy. They shoot the guy who tries to save him. That night was the first time I understood the full brutality of the job. The enemy didn't fight fair. They didn't fight openly. They didn't fight for honor. They fought to kill, to maim, to terrorize. And on that night, in that flash of light and shattering rounds, I learned something that would carry me through the rest of the deployment. In Ramadi, survival wasn't guaranteed. You had to earn it. Every night, every mission, every breath.
The thing about Ramadi is that it doesn't give you time to breathe. The moment you think you've seen the worst it has to offer, it finds a new way to remind you that you're living in the middle of a war zone where every direction is the wrong direction. That lesson hit home during one of our EOD escort missions, the ones that drained you physically, mentally, and spiritually. Escorting EOD wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fast, it wasn't clean. It was slow, exposed, deliberate, and dangerous as hell. We were out on a dismounted patrol, walking EOD to a UXO site, an unexploded ordnance call. That meant getting out of the trucks, leaving the protection of steel and armor, and walking along dirt, concrete, alleyways, and structures that could hide anything. Dismounting in Ramadi always felt like stepping into the lion's mouth with nothing but a pocket knife. We were maybe halfway to the UXO when the world snapped. A sniper fired at us. You never forget the sound of sniper fire at close range. It cuts the air like a whip, a razor-sharp crack that makes your stomach drop. The round hit close, too close, and for a second, everything froze in place. Then came the return fire, not from the enemy, but from one of my own, SSG Luciano. That man didn't hesitate, didn't freeze, didn't wait for permission. He reacted like instinct itself had picked up a rifle. He fired at the only piece of cover the sniper could have used, an abandoned building on the crest of a hill to our west. It was the only angle that made sense, the only window, the only place with visibility. His action made the rounds stop, just like that. Sniper fire ceased. He may have just saved someone's life, maybe all of ours. But here's the fucked up part. Back on base, instead of someone saying, "Hey Luciano, good thinking," we got the opposite. They talked about giving him an Article 15. Why? Because of rules of engagement. Because some commander sitting behind a desk didn't like that a soldier returned fire without a formal green light. Not because he was wrong, not because he was reckless, but because war on paper never matches war on the ground. I remember feeling something heavy, something cold settle in my chest.
If calling out bravery was going to get punished, then what the hell were we even doing out there? This mission, this city, this war was rewriting the rules every day. And yet the people judging our actions weren't the ones walking down alleys with snipers taking shots at their heads. Here's what I realized in that moment, and I carried this lesson for the rest of the deployment. Sometimes the only award a soldier gets is survival, and sometimes even that is taken from them. Luciano didn't get a medal that day. He didn't get recognition. He didn't get credit, but he damn sure earned it. And he never complained. Not once, not later, not ever. Because he wasn't doing it for glory. He was doing it because we were his brothers. And he wasn't letting a sniper take one of us without a fight. People talk about courage like it's a feeling, but it's not. It's a decision, made fast, made cold, made when nobody's watching and nobody's praising you. Luciano made that choice every time he stepped outside the wire. This was just the first time I watched it up close. There are thousands of firefights in Iraq that no one will ever see. Moments of chaos, fear, instinct, and violence that disappear into memory because nobody is standing there with a camera. Most of the time, the only record of those fights is the breathing of the men who survived them. But this one got caught on film. Not staged, not posed, not cleaned up. Real, raw, violent, exactly as it happened. We were at a post-blast site, one of several we hit every damn week. Another IED, another crater, another pile of twisted metal, another moment where we had to figure out what blew up, how, and whether the enemy left us a surprise to step on. EOD was there doing their job. We were pulling security. Same rhythm as always. Then the sniper fired. It wasn't a warning shot. It wasn't distant. It wasn't random. He was shooting to kill. Rounds snapped against the dirt near us, kicking up dust and sharp little explosions. The sound was crisp, the kind that cuts the air instead of echoing. You know a sniper shot because it feels like the air itself is weaponized. Everything exploded into motion, and once again, just like before, it was Luciano. The man was already moving before the rest of us fully processed the direction of fire. He pivoted, dropped to a knee, and opened up on the building where the sniper was hiding. No hesitation, no fear, no second guessing. Pure instinct, pure warrior. And for a moment, just a second, the battlefield froze in this perfect, terrible balance. Dust swirling in the sunlight, the echo of shots hitting concrete. EOD crouched low. My guys going to work. Luciano firing like the world depended on it. And that's when an Air Force combat camera guy happened to capture the moment. Most soldiers never get their fights recorded. This one did. That photo ended up in Guns and Ammo, in advertisements, in gear catalogs, in military circles. People saw the intensity, the posture, the danger. But what they didn't see was the reality behind the still frame. We were getting shot at. We were exposed. We were doing the job nobody ever sees. And once again, Luciano was returning fire to protect every man there. I remember yelling at him, "Get the fuck back, take cover." He got pissed, really pissed. He hated being yelled at during a firefight, especially when he knew he was doing the right thing. But I would have rather had him mad at me than dead. And here's the part that still bothers me. He wouldn't get a medal for it, not even a fucking pat on the back. Why? Because of the same bullshit rules that tried to get him punished the first time. Because he fired without the proper channels. Because sometimes leadership is more scared of paperwork than bullets. So I didn't report it, not the way it happened. If calling in truth got my soldiers punished, then truth wasn't worth a damn. But make no mistake, he saved lives. Not just once, not just twice, but every time he dropped into that stance and returned fire like he was born for it. That's the thing about heroes in war. Most of them never get recognized. But the men who were there, the ones who watched him ignore fear and act anyway, we remember. And that's all the proof he ever needed. If there's one thing civilians almost never understand about the war, it's this. Engineers and EOD were the primary targets. Not infantry, not armor, not headquarters. Us. Because we were the ones who ruined the enemy's plans. We were the ones who took apart their bombs.
We were the ones who exposed their trapdoors. We were the ones who forced them to fight instead of hiding behind IEDs. And because of that, EOD techs lived every day with a target painted on their backs. Not metaphorically, but literally. Snipers watched for them. Triggermen waited for them. IRL teams scouted them. Every bomb maker in the province hated them, which meant my platoon, the Outcasts, had one mission above all the others: protect the EOD techs with our lives. We didn't lose a single EOD tech the entire deployment, not one. And that wasn't luck. That wasn't chance. That wasn't divine intervention. It was discipline. It was awareness. It was ruthlessness. It was my men refusing to let death slip past them. Most units stayed in their trucks until EOD fully dismounted. It was safer, it was cleaner, it was easier on the nerves. After all, nobody wants to step on a pressure plate or catch a sniper round while pulling security. But not us. We cleared the damn area before EOD ever opened their doors. We walked through the site first. We scanned the rooftops. We checked alleys. We hunted for triggermen. We studied the ground like it had secrets. If there was no sniper, no command wire, no triggerman, then, and only then, EOD got out. The Marine techs noticed it, every one of them. Hell, the one they called Money Shot, a Marine EOD tech famous for being photographed during missions, told me once, "It always seems to happen to the good security teams." He said it after we lost 3 guys later in the deployment. Not one of his techs died that day. Not one. Because my men shielded them. Every time, every mission, every blast site. They were like eggs in a basket. Fragile, valuable, essential. And we guarded them like our lives depended on it. And in a way, they did. Because protecting EOD wasn't just about saving them. It was about saving everyone driving down that road tomorrow. It was about preventing the next roadside funeral. It was about giving Marines, soldiers, Iraqis, anyone a fighting chance. And yet the EOD teams never acted like they were better than us. Never acted like they were the bomb guys with all the spotlight. They thanked us. They respected us. They trusted us. Every time an EOD tech stepped onto an IED site, he knew, if the Outcasts cleared it, I can walk. That trust meant something. In a war where nothing was guaranteed, where even armored vehicles could become coffins, where the enemy tried to kill us from every angle imaginable, that trust was everything. And honestly, I was proud of that. Not of myself, of them, of my men, of my misfits, of the platoon nobody wanted, of the outcasts who became the shield for the most hunted men in Anbar. That was our legacy. Not medals, not awards, not recognition in a headquarters briefing, but this. We didn't lose a single EOD tech. Not one. Not on our watch. Up to this point in the deployment, as brutal as Ramadi was, we had something we could hold on to. Confidence in our vehicles. The Cougar, the RG-31, the Buffalo. They were monsters. Thick-skinned, angled, heavy, built to take hell on the chin and keep their crews alive. We'd already seen them get blasted, flipped on their sides, axles blown off, suspension torn apart, and the soldiers inside still walked away. Bloodied, bruised, concussed, but alive. That confidence kept us moving. It kept us sane. It kept us from thinking too hard about the fact that every road, every pothole, every patch of dirt was trying to kill us. But one night, that confidence cracked. We got a 9-line call, emergency support. A route clearance element had been hit. That alone was strange. Route clearance usually had their own EOD. They handled their own blasts. They didn't call us unless something truly horrific happened. We rolled out immediately. I led the convoy, because if anyone was going to hit a secondary IED or a pressure switch, I wanted it to be my truck. I didn't think about whether that was fair to my driver or gunner. I just did it. As we approached the site, I could see the RG-31 from a distance. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The side armor wasn't just damaged. It was opened, punched through, like someone had taken a steel spike and rammed it straight through the hull. When we got closer, the smell hit first. Not burning flesh this time, but something else.
blood mixed with hydraulic fluid, thick, wet, metallic, indistinguishable. Because inside the vehicle, the two had blended, sprayed across the interior in a way no one forgets. It was an EFP, an explosively formed penetrator, the most feared weapon in Iraq. Not homemade, not improvised trash bombs, not pressure plates or daisy chains. Professionally engineered kill shots, built to pierce tanks, let alone route clearance vehicles, almost certainly supplied by Iran. This wasn't an explosion. It was a sniper shot made of copper and fire, a concave metal plate, a shaped charge, a molten projectile fired at supersonic speed. One purpose, to slice through armor and the men inside it. And it worked. For the first time, a route clearance vehicle didn't just get hit, someone died. And standing there, staring at that hole, seeing the carnage inside that truck, I felt something cold crawl down my spine. The enemy had just changed the game. Our armor didn't make us invincible. Our vehicles weren't magic. The war wasn't predictable. Up until then, we believed, even if we didn't admit it, that the vehicles would save us. We leaned on that faith. We rolled out every night with that unspoken promise. If we get hit, the armor will protect us. But staring at that EFP hole, realizing that a molten copper slug had torn through inches of hardened steel and taken a man's life like it was nothing, I knew. We weren't as safe as we thought, not even close. And my men felt it too. Confidence evaporated, tension increased, stress multiplied. Every pothole became a potential death sentence. Every shadow felt like it was hiding something more sophisticated, more lethal, more precise. After that night, everything changed. The way the platoon breathed, the way we scanned the roads, the way the gunner gripped the turret handles, the way drivers slowed at potholes, the way everyone held their breath at the sight of disturbed dirt. The EFP had done more than kill a soldier. It killed our illusion of safety. And that illusion never came back. The old RG-31, the night I took the seat nobody wanted. After the EFP hit, something changed in all of us. Something quiet, something internal, something you could see in the way the guys looked at the vehicles before mounting up. Before that night, every RG-31 and Cougar felt like armor-plated miracles. Now they felt mortal. And then it happened. We got a replacement RG-31. Not the new kind, not the updated, heavily armored, reinforced variant. No, they gave us an old one of the first models. Basically a prototype. Light armor, thin skin, barely any upgrades. A relic from the early days of the war. Nobody wanted it. Not because they were cowards, but because after seeing what an EFP did to the new RG-31, getting into the old one felt like stepping into a cardboard coffin. My men avoided it. They didn't say it out loud, but I could read it on their faces. Hell, I didn't want to get in it either. But leadership isn't about giving speeches. It's not about standing tall and pretending to be fearless. Sometimes it's about stepping into the spot that terrifies everyone else, so they don't have to. So I took that seat. I'll take the old RG, I told them. You take my Cougar. My driver didn't love that decision. He didn't argue, good soldiers don't, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. And here's the truth, I wasn't fearless. I was scared as hell. Because now I understood, fully, what could happen. I knew what molten copper could do. I knew how armor failed. I knew how fast death could carve its way into a vehicle. But I also knew this, if anyone was going to sit in that death trap, it was going to be me, not one of my kids. That night we rolled out on route clearance. No music, no small talk, just the hum of the engine and the heavy silence of men who'd seen too much, too fast. The roads looked different now, more sinister, more alive, like they were watching us. Every pothole made me clench my teeth. Every dip in the road made my pulse spike. Every piece of trash felt like a threat waiting to explode. I kept scanning the road, hard, methodical, obsessive, because fear sharpens you. It doesn't weaken you if you learn how to ride it. Midway through the mission, the radio crackled. I heard one of my gunners laughing. Hey, SFC Havens, you sure it's not your night again? Hope that old shitbox holds up. The dark humor helped. Hell, it was the only thing that made nights like that survivable. Because in Ramadi, jokes weren't just jokes, they were shields. They kept you sane, they kept you human. But beneath the humor, beneath the noise, beneath the mission chatter, something real was happening. My men saw I was willing to die for them, and they never forgot it. Leadership in combat isn't about being the bravest. It's not about being the strongest. It's not about being the smartest. It's about being the one who steps forward when everyone else pulls back. Not because you want to die, but because their lives matter more. And this platoon, these outcasts, they were worth everything.
The night I got blown up twice.
There are bad nights in war, and then there are the nights that stay with you forever. The ones that feel like the universe is stacking the deck just to see how much bullshit you can survive before you snap. This was one of those nights. We were out on route clearance, moving like we always did, slow, deliberate, scanning every pothole, every patch of dirt, every shadow, because we knew death didn't always announce itself with a timer or a sparkling red wire. Sometimes it was just buried under a thin layer of dust. And then we hit one. Boom! A concussion so violent it rattled my skull and slammed my brain against the inside of my head. My Cougar, my big, armored workhorse, had its front axle blown clean off, just ripped away like it was nothing. The explosion hit us so hard that for a moment, all I could hear was a high-pitched ringing, and the world felt sideways even though we were still upright. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just pure shock. I remember cussing like a madman, trying to unbuckle my seatbelt while my nose was running like a faucet. I was furious. I'm gonna kill this motherfucker who blew up my truck. Not because I was actually going to hunt down some insurgent, but because anger is a hell of a lot easier to deal with than fear. I climbed out, did my 5 and 25s, and then looked at the Cougar. The entire front end was shredded. Holy fuck. That's all I could say. I checked for a command wire because at that point, I was half ready to chase a trigger man down an alley with my bare hands. Meanwhile, my guys were laughing their asses off inside the convoy. Hey, SFC Havens, guess it's not your night. You pissed somebody off. Better you than me, Sergeant. Dark humor, again, the only medicine we had. But the mission wasn't over. LT Johnny told me to stay put with the damaged Cougar until recovery assets came. So after I handed off my crew to other vehicles in the convoy, I climbed into the Buffalo. That dumb mistake still pisses me off. Because not even 30 minutes later, boom, we got hit again. A second IED. A second violent blast. A second time the world went sideways. I slammed forward, instinctively grabbed anything I could to stay upright, and my brain started yelling, "Are you fucking kidding me? Twice in one night?" The radio crackled with laughter, sarcasm, disbelief. Hey, Havens, seriously, are you cursed? Sarge, you're 0 for 2 tonight. Just stay in the truck next time. I wanted to punch every single one of them and hug them at the same time. Because if they were joking, it meant they were alive. That's the truth of combat. If you can still make fun of it, the fear hasn't won. After the second blast, I didn't even feel shock anymore. Just irritation. Just annoyance. Just the exhausted realization that somehow, some way, the universe wasn't done screwing with me. But beneath all the humor and adrenaline, something important was happening. My men saw that I wasn't invincible. But I wasn't afraid either, and that mattered. Because soldiers don't need a fearless leader. They need a steady one. Someone who takes the hit, gets back up, and keeps going. Someone who shows them, you can survive this, even when the world tries to kill you twice. That night didn't break me. It hardened me. It sharpened me. It taught me that fear isn't something you eliminate. It's something you drag along with you and force into silence. 2 blasts in one night. 2 miracles in one night. 2 reminders. We lived. We fought. We kept going. Clang, clang. You ready to go yet? From inside the vehicle I heard, "You motherfucker." And then their engine roared to life. The entire Bradley peeled out, tracks grinding, throwing dust everywhere, straight to the head of the gate like they'd been ready the whole damn time. I just laughed. Not to mock them, but because the contrast was insane. My platoon had been living in sector every day. These guys lived behind walls and still didn't want to leave them. They were sitting in a Bradley. We were rolling around in HMMWVs and RGs. But that night, because someone forced the issue, they moved. And that's leadership. Not about rank, not about speeches, not about authority. Sometimes leadership is banging on the side of a Bradley until someone listens.
The Bradley standoff, forcing an infantry battalion into the fight. There are parts of the war that are hard, violent, traumatic. And then there are parts so ridiculous you almost swear you're in a dark comedy instead of a combat zone. This is one of those stories. We got called out to an IED site in the southern part of Ramadi, out on Route Jones. We pulled up and immediately realized the problem. The infantry battalion responsible for the sector never pushed out their far side security. That's basic. That's standard. You don't go to a fucking bomb site without security on both sides. But their Bradleys, sitting on the fob, parked, engines cold, crews inside doing nothing. So I radioed up and told them we needed the Bradleys immediately. Their reply? They're at the gate. No, they weren't. Not even close. So I said, fuck it, I'll go get them myself. I drove to the infantry battalion HQ, walked inside, asked where the hell our security element was. The battalion soldier pointed casually toward the front gate. They're right there. I walked back outside, and sure enough, the Bradley was just sitting there, turret pointed at nothing, ramp closed, zero signs of movement. So I walked right up to the track and banged on the armor. Clang, 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 loud enough that everyone inside knew someone had a problem. The ramp dropped. Can I help you? We're not rolling out. It's too dangerous. Too dangerous. A Bradley, a 25-ton armored beast, was too dangerous to take into sector. Meanwhile, my platoon had just crossed that sector in up-armored HMMWVs. I stared at the guy like he'd lost his damn mind. You're in a fucking Bradley, and I just rolled through that sector in a HMMWV. He didn't care, didn't budge, didn't move an inch. So I walked back into their battalion HQ and talked to the commander. His stance? We're not going out. I told him the brigade ordered the mission. He still refused. So I stepped outside, keyed up my radio, and called the one person who could fix stupidity, Captain Nar. He was pissed the moment he heard it. Didn't yell at me, didn't question me, just said, give me 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, right on cue, I walked back out to the same Bradley, banged on the armor again. Clang, clang. You ready to go yet? From inside the vehicle I heard, you motherfucker. And then their engine roared to life. The entire Bradley peeled out, tracks grinding, throwing dust everywhere, straight to the head of the gate like they'd been ready the whole damn time. I just laughed. Not to mock them, but because the contrast was insane. My platoon had been living in sector every day. These guys lived behind walls and still didn't want to leave them. They were sitting in a Bradley. We were rolling around in HMMWVs and RGs. But that night, because someone forced the issue, they moved. And that's leadership. Not about rank, not about speeches, not about authority. Sometimes leadership is banging on the side of a Bradley until someone listens. Some missions start with confusion, some with adrenaline, some with boredom. This one started with a 9-line request that hit harder than most. When the radio crackled and the 9-line came through, it wasn't a routine IED call. It wasn't a route clearance request. It wasn't even an EOD emergency. Part of the transmission said, pick up the firefighters on your way out. That alone told us everything. If they were requesting American firefighters, not Iraqi emergency crews, not locals, it meant something out there was burning, and burning bad. We loaded up, rolled off the fob, and stopped to retrieve the firefighters, fully geared, quiet, focused, but with that look that said they had no idea what they were about to walk into. Firefighters don't usually ride into active combat zones with an engineer platoon, but Ramadi didn't give a shit about job descriptions. I told them, stay close, we'll get you there. They nodded. No bravado, no hesitation, just professionals doing a job they didn't ask for. As we approached the blast site, the smoke was already visible, dark, thick columns rising above the rooftops. By the time we dismounted and got the firefighters up to the wreck, the scene was worse than any of us expected. A Marine vehicle was still smoldering, flames flickering inside the twisted metal. The rear of the vehicle had been ripped open, exposed like a wound. Heat radiated off it in waves. The firefighters rushed forward to do their job, but before they could even start spraying water or foam, the reality hit. 3 Marines were already gone, already covered, already laid out on stretchers. We hadn't come to save them. We'd come to give them dignity in death. A Marine captain stood there alone, staring at what was left of his men. Not yelling, not cursing, not giving orders, just standing in the street like the world had stopped rotating. When I approached him, he didn't try to be strong. He didn't hide his face. He didn't pretend he was okay. He just whispered, barely audible, "They're gone." There was nothing for the firefighters to save, just a burning vehicle and the last traces of a fight those Marines didn't survive. The firefighter I escorted, who had expected chaos, flame, urgency, instead found himself standing in the middle of grief. His job shifted from saving a burning truck to helping us close out a tragedy. I stepped closer to the captain, not to command the scene, but to shield him from the eyes behind us, from the Marines gathering, the firefighters pausing, the soldiers watching. He didn't cry, he didn't break down, he just looked hollow, the kind of hollow you only see in war, when someone loses more than a battle. We stood there together, me, the firefighter, the captain, surrounded by smoke, by silence, by the weight of 3 American sons who didn't get to go home. And in that moment, all the noise of Ramadi disappeared. No gunfire, no radios, just the awful quiet of understanding. This is the part of war nobody ever prepares you for. I escorted the firefighters out there, but none of us had any idea that we weren't arriving at a rescue. We were arriving at a goodbye. The weight we carried after the 3 Marines. War doesn't stop for grief. It doesn't pause because someone just lost their men. It doesn't slow down because you witness something that tears a hole through your humanity. In Ramadi, the clock never stopped. The missions never stopped. The danger never stopped. And neither did we. The silence after the scene. After we escorted the firefighters back and cleared the site, the platoon rolled back onto Camp Ramadi with that quiet, ghost-like silence that only happens when everyone is thinking the same thing and nobody wants to say it out loud. Nobody cracked jokes. Nobody talked shit on the radio. Nobody even took their gear off fast. We were just still. Because once you see 3 Marines laid out in the dirt like that, once you see a captain standing alone in his grief, you can't unsee it. You carry it. Even the outcast platoon, the wild ones, the misfits, the shit talkers, walked back from their trucks like they were carrying cinder blocks on their backs. For a moment, the entire platoon felt older than it had any right to. But here's the truth you learn in places like Ramadi. You don't get time to process anything. Trauma stacks, shock layers itself. You shove everything down and keep moving because you don't have a choice. Mission tempo doesn't care about your soul. We were back on the mission roster that same night. No memorial, no break, no decompression. Just, outcasts, you're up. That's war. You do not get to choose when you rest. And even though I was the platoon sergeant, even though every bone in my body wanted to say, give my guys 24 hours, they need to breathe, I knew better. Because if we didn't go out, someone else would, and someone else might end up like those Marines. So we loaded up the trucks. We checked our radios, we checked our jammers, we checked our weapons, we checked each other, and we rolled out again. The human part nobody talks about. Here's the part that never makes it into movies. You can't mourn people you didn't know as deeply as their own family would, but the grief still hits you like a punch to the chest. Because they were Americans, because they were your brothers in uniform, because they died doing the same job you're stepping into the next night. And because deep down, every soldier knows, their death is a mirror. It could be you, it could be your truck, it could be your platoon. Some guys hide from that thought, some bury it, some pretend they're invincible, some laugh it off. Me, I carried it, and I carried it hard, because I was responsible for my guys. And seeing those Marines covered up and lined in the dirt made something click inside me. Not on my watch, not my guys, not this platoon. That vow, that internal promise, became the driving force behind every call I made for the rest of that deployment. Section: Becoming overprotective without even knowing it. After that day, I changed. Not because I was scared, not because I doubted my platoon, but because I refused to ever stand over one of my soldiers the way that Marine captain had stood over his. I watched everything harder. I double-checked routes. I argued more with higher when something didn't feel right. I placed my trucks differently. I cleared more thoroughly. I took more risk on myself and less on my squad leaders. I walked closer to blast sites. I stepped in front of people when I shouldn't have. It wasn't hero shit. It wasn't ego. It wasn't bravado. It was fear disguised as leadership. And it was love, the fucked up military version of it. The kind of love that says, I would rather die than see one of you get taken from me. That's what the Marines' deaths did to me. They sharpened me. They hardened me. They made me relentless. And whether the platoon knew it or not in that moment, that was the day I decided I would break every bone in my body before I ever let Ramadi take one of them. The night after the Marines were killed, Ramadi stopped feeling like a place on a map and started feeling like a living predator, something that watched you, measured you, waited for you to slip. This is where everything changed, not because of one event, but because of the rhythm of danger that started settling into our bones. A rhythm you could feel even when the city was quiet. A rhythm that said, you're next. How Ramadi tests you. The city didn't just attack, it probed, it studied. It wore you down before it ever tried to kill you. Every night mission became a psychological fight long before it became a physical one. The roads felt tighter, the alleys darker, the silence heavier, the shadows longer, the pauses on the radio more meaningful. You start paying attention to things you never noticed before: a turned over trash can, a piece of wire in the dirt, a pothole you swear wasn't there yesterday, a set of footprints near a wall, a door cracked open too much, a rooftop figure that disappears when you blink. Every detail becomes a potential threat, and your brain runs at 200 miles per hour trying to stay ahead of an enemy who only needs to be right once. The sound of incoming. One thing you never forget about Ramadi is how sound changes. Gunfire doesn't crack, it snaps like someone cracking bones. IEDs don't boom, they punch the air out of the world. A rocket or RPG doesn't whoosh, it screams past you like metal ripping the sky apart. But the most dangerous sound is the one you don't hear. The click, the pressure, the hidden fuse, the quiet before the explosion. That silence is the real killer. Because in Ramadi, silence meant someone was setting a trap. My platoon starts to transform. Every member of the Outcast platoon changed in their own way. Some got sharper, some got quieter, some got reckless because the fear was too heavy to carry. Some became laser-focused killers who could smell an IED from 200 meters away. But one thing united all of us. We didn't want to die, and we didn't want the guy next to us to die either. Ramadi forced that bond into existence. Not through trust exercises, not through training, but through shared survival. Every night out there felt like a test. Are you paying attention? Are you scared? Are you calm? Are you ready? Can you handle losing someone? Can you keep moving after it happens? Can you keep your head on right when everything around you goes wrong? Ramadi didn't give you a score at the end. It gave you another mission. Leadership under fire. Most people think leadership is speeches, awards, and ceremonies. Not here. Leadership in Ramadi was being the first one off the truck, arguing with higher when something smelled wrong, forcing yourself to walk closer to the blast site, noticing the small signs your soldiers were struggling, checking on your gunners after every engagement, letting the fear hit you only in private, carrying blame that wasn't yours, protecting your guys even when they hated you for it. You don't get medals for that. You don't get recognized for it. It doesn't show up on an NCOER. But it's the kind of leadership that keeps kids alive. And that's worth more than any ribbon. The nights start blending together. The nights that followed were all the same on paper. Roll out, clear a route, escort EOD, deal with a blast. take sniper fire, return to base, reset, go back out. But emotionally, they were all different. One night you'd be joking with the guy in the next truck. The next night you'd be praying his truck doesn't get hit. Another night you'd be staring at a roadside trash bag like it was a loaded gun. Another night you'd feel calm for no reason, and that scared you the most. Because calm in Ramadi usually meant something was about to happen. The city had a sixth sense for timing. It hit when morale was low, or when people were tired, or when someone got complacent, or when the platoon finally started feeling confident. Ramadi waited for cracks, then it struck right through them. Leadership isn't rank, it's humanity. There are moments in war that have nothing to do with tactics, nothing to do with weapons, and nothing to do with battle drills. They have to do with being human, with understanding pain, with recognizing trauma, with seeing someone standing in the same darkness you once walked through. One of my squad leaders, SSG Daviej, got a Red Cross message that no soldier should ever receive. His son had passed away. When he told me, his face didn't break, his voice didn't crack. He didn't collapse or fall apart like Hollywood would show you. He stood there like a man caught between two impossible worlds, his grief and his duty. He said he wanted to come back. He wanted to return to Iraq after the funeral. He wanted to be with his men. He wanted to lead them, protect them, stand next to them in the trucks. And I saw myself in him, because years earlier, I had made the mistake he was about to make. When my son died, I drowned myself in work, in missions, in responsibility, in anything but the pain. Tua went through hell alone because I thought being at work made me strong. It didn't. It made me absent. And standing there in front of Daviej, I felt every memory of that mistake hit me again. So I told him the words I should have told myself. Stay with your family. Don't come back. They need you more than we do. He fought me on it, not out of pride, not out of ego, but out of love for his platoon. But I held the line. He went home. He stayed home. He mourned with the people who needed him. And I didn't know it then, but that decision would save his life. Because the man who replaced him, the squad leader who stepped into his place, would later be killed in an IED blast. War has a fucked up way of revealing the weight of your decisions, not in the moment, but months later when you finally see the full picture. The burden leaders never talk about. People think leadership is about strength, but sometimes leadership is about carrying guilt you never asked for. You wonder, did I do the right thing? Was I responsible for who lived and who didn't? What if I had said something different? What if I had made another choice? What if I sent him out that night? What if? What if? What if? Those questions stay with you longer than any blast. But deep down, I knew this truth. If I hadn't told Daviej to stay home, he'd be dead. And every time I thought about the man who replaced him, every time I thought about that IED, I remembered something that leadership schools never teach. Sometimes saving a soldier's life has nothing to do with combat. It has everything to do with recognizing pain and refusing to let them fight when their heart is bleeding. Looking back, that moment with Daviej marked a shift inside me, a pivot, the point where leadership stopped being about controlling chaos and started being about protecting the people inside it. And that shift, that internal change, was the final piece of who I was becoming as a leader in Ramadi. But what none of us knew, what none of us could have imagined, was that everything, every hardship, every blast, every loss, every lesson, was pushing us toward one single day, a day that would define the rest of my life, a day that would define the Outcast platoon, a day that would burn itself into memory in a way no soldier forgets. Because all of this, the grief, the personnel changes, the overprotectiveness, the instinct sharpening, the danger rising, the pace increasing, was building towards something.
something none of us were ready for. November 11th, 2006 was coming, and Ramadi was about to take its biggest swing.